Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the April 9th, 2019 Curriculum Committee meeting for Radnor Township School District. The first item on the agenda are introductions and administrative remarks. Dr. McQuiggan.
Thank you. Just to give you a little preview of tonight, we have two presentations tonight. One is going to be about Feedback Studio, and the other one is going to be about the district's equity plan. So the first one will be Mr. Kearney together with Bob Hostetler from the high school and Mrs. Kevkis, and then the second one will be Mrs. Kevkis and Mr. Bechtel. Next month, just to give you a heads up for May, we're going to be looking at the findings from the wellness study. So not recommendations at this point. We're at the findings level. So we'll have the findings from the wellness study, and we're also going to be looking at our PAYS data as part of that. So we will have a very full meeting next month as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to public comment. Is there any public comment? Okay. Seeing none, that brings us down to the approval of the minutes. Committee?
Good to me.
Okay. Everybody okay with? All right, so the minutes stand as they are written. Do we want to switch around the order here?
We could do the board action items first.
Okay.
Okay. So in your packet, I'm sure you noticed we have a donation at the high school. We have parents who donated some shelving for the costume closet, and that's put on there as an acknowledgement, $400. And then we also have an overnight trip that requires your approval. Our high school team did very well at the Sea Perch competition, and they're going on to the next level. So that means that we need to approve for them an overnight trip so that they can travel at the end of May. And they've provided our budgetary numbers. The students are going to be making a contribution to that as well, which you can see, and there will be 8 students and 1 chaperone.
And can you just refresh my memory? What exactly did they do to win this, and what is it that they're going to?
So Sea Perch is one of the competitions that the students do in the Project Lead the Way program, the Gateways program at the middle school.
This is the underwater robotics team. It's really cool. I remember this from last year.
Right.
And I
so
remember because their parent lead was so worried that we wouldn't approve the budget. She came and specifically requested that we please fund this.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that at the high school
program.
it's a club. Don't they work as a club, Dan, at the high school? Sea Perch, it's a club at the high school? Yeah, so at the middle school, they do it as part of the Gateways program, but because students have been so involved in it, now that those students are moving up to the high school, they're doing it as part of a club. So they have their competition, they create their robot, they program it, they have to execute a series of, it's like Lego, similar to Lego robotics. They execute a series of tasks with their robot, and then they also have to talk about their strategy, their team building, it's got a lot of different components to it. But the high school team did very, very well. All right, thank you.
That is really cool. Okay. Are there any other?
There we go. Wow. Great.
Any other items that we would have on the business agenda from curriculum?
Just those two.
Okay. Amazing. No clubs. No.
It's April.
Okay.
Soon, next year. Lots of clubs. All right, so should we go ahead and start with number 1? All right.
Yeah, we're ready.
So let's invite the group up to talk about Feedback Studio. It's true. I think we've had gloves.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, it's nice to be here this evening, safely.
So as I think you'll remember, we had said that Feedback Studio is one of those things we wanted to look at as part of our district's writing goal, specifically at the high school this year. Yeah, the English department has expressed interest in Turnitin and Feedback Studio for some time, primarily, and I guess initially as a plagiarism checker, but as I think you'll hear based on some of the research we did pretty early on, saw that it had some abilities well beyond just that for providing feedback to students. And from the very beginning, it was seen as a way to help students understand the research and citation process, to help them avoid plagiarism as a learning tool, not at all as a gotcha or anything along those lines. Mr. Hostetler and Mrs. Kevkis are going to share with you some of the activities that have taken place over the course of this year to learn a little bit more about Feedback Studio and how we see it progressing over the next year or so. Yeah, you have a brochure, and I think you have a
Yeah,
a
so
sort
I
of
just gave you
overview
a
of some of those
copy,
items.
a good copy of the brochure, a nice glossy one.
So welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for coming, taking the time to inform us.
So we are excited to have Feedback Studio coming to the high school next year. In the fall, we gave you a timeline of what we would be looking at over the course of the first semester and into the second semester. So in the fall, we met with Dr. Kearney and Dr. McQuiggan, multiple times to discuss what programs were out there, what we felt was best to suit the needs of the high school, and Feedback Studio really came forward, specifically for the ability, like Dr. Kearney said, it was initially an originality checker, but it has expanded its use in so many capacities in terms of being able to provide timely feedback to the students, and that's something we really looked at, and also its ability to work well with Schoology, since that's our learning management system at the high school, and so that was a really big piece of it, the way that it integrates so seamlessly. So in September, we took a look at the cost and made sure that that was put into the budget for the 2019-2020 school year. In October, we had a meeting with the English department and with our representative from Turnitin, Pam Marklow, who did a Zoom meeting with the entire department to talk about the basics of the program and what it could offer to the English department. After we were done speaking with Ms. Marklow, we had a really nice discussion with the department about what their concerns were, what they were excited about, how they saw it integrating into the curriculum, what types of assignments they would want to use it for, whether that was major writing assessments, research papers, et cetera. And so that discussion kind of, ensued. From November till just about March, Dr. Kearney, myself, Mr. Hostetler, I was about to say Dr. Hostetler, and Ms. Verwilly Scott, another one of our English teachers, spent some time looking at local high schools and universities to see how they had put Turnitin into place. So we spoke with LM and actually went there and visited them. We had a conference call with Conestoga High School. We have a call scheduled for after spring break with Great Valley, and we have spoken with Villanova, who will be providing us some statistics. Villanova does not use Turnitin, but they use a similar program. However, when I spoke with Pat Majidi, who is one of our actual Radnor parents, but also the provost of the university, he shared that there really is an issue in college in terms of, cheating. And so it's something that is, readily apparent and needs to be addressed. So he was willing to share any information he could to help us with that. One of the things that we heard from Lower Merion and from Conestoga, and I would hope to hear the same thing when we talk to Great Valley, is that they've all had really positive experiences with it. It allows for timely feedback, which is something that we were concerned with. It allows for a lot of discussion back and forth and collaboration between the teacher and the student in terms of, what you're looking for in the writing process and making sure that, it's really a creative and collaborative experience from the beginning. There was no true concerns. One of the questions that we asked them was, when you initially rolled it out, were there any, snags or problems that you ran into? And everything from what they said really was very good and very positive. So, good feedback from them, no pun intended. So, we're at the stage now where we've confirmed what we need to hear in terms of how it's going to be implemented. We've discussed it with the English teachers, and I think at this point we've decided that it will be used for the purposes of major writing assessments and certainly anything that has research involved. I made the analogy the other day to open campus at the high school. Some people love it and some people don't love it. But I think it's really our job as educators to teach our students to be responsible. And so having that independence over the course of the 4 years at the high school is their chance to learn how to be responsible going off campus in a safe way. And if they have issues, we can address them when they're with us and they're in a closed and safe environment. I think it's the same thing with originality. Our kids really need to learn how to properly use the internet and how to properly cite sources. And I would much rather have them run into that issue with us than to move on to university and lose their place at a university because they have cheated. This is our chance to really let them understand what it means to properly work with resources and to cite those resources properly. And I think I'll turn it over to you for a moment because I think you had a story to share.
I do. I have a few. I don't know if any of you saw the article in the paper this weekend. The Inquirer on Saturday ran a short piece about how families, students, and teachers use the internet when they do homework or when they make assignments. And as part of that article, buried inside the paper, there were comments about cheating, which inevitably comes up when we talk about going online and getting that kind of information. So I think one of the exciting parts for us is just being able to have a method for, as Mrs. Kevkis said, for helping students learn the difference between originality and borrowing. And if we use this particular program, I think what the English department is most excited about is that it allows for so much flexibility. For our teachers who are completely grading online, we discovered that teachers can tailor all of the comments that they want to their own way of grading, and it's a quick click and drag onto the paper. And for teachers who still enjoy working with paper and pen, the paper can be run through the system. The results will appear for the teacher, and then he or she can use those results, but tailor written comments onto the paper. So everyone can initially win using this. No one has to change an immediate grading style or teaching style, but as we become more familiar with it, it sounds as if, at least with all of the teachers who are using it as a grading tool as well, that it actually allows for a quicker turnaround and a more consistent approach because the comments are already there, and so they can just be imported into the work the student does. So it doesn't turn out to be a gotcha activity. It really turns out to be an educational one. And on another note, I have 3 children who all went through college, and all of them had a system like this. And as they'd come home and talk to me about it, I was just sort of puzzled as to why we hadn't started to help this next generation get used to a tool like this.
Thank you, Mr. Hostetler. So one of the things that we will be putting into place is our communication plan at this point. We have a letter that will be going home to families right after spring break that explains the fact that we will implement it at the high school and how it works. We'll be looking to revise our student handbook over the summer to make sure that it reflects a statement of plagiarism in regard to Turnitin that follows Board Policy 106. And in addition to that, this May, during in-service, we'll be meeting with the English department and trainers from Turnitin for them to learn how to actually use the nuts and bolts of the program, so to speak, to give them some time over the summer to, work with it. They've created what we call a sandbox, somewhere where they can practice and learn all the, different abilities that the program has. So that's it.
Okay, so questions. I have a few, but I'm going to turn it over to you guys first. Sarah, you want to go? Andrew?
So, and I remember we talked about this because you were looking at a couple of different programs. Have you kind of done any test runs as part of as your pilot this year has gone well, you've tested it throughout the English department or just certain English teachers, or?
So they'll be, now that we have access to it, we've paid for the training, they have access to the program, so now they can start taking a look at it now.
Okay, I thought the pilot had already taken place. That was my misunderstanding.
No.
Okay. So we're going to pilot it in the fall, or we're just going to
pilot the English department will pilot it solely in the fall.
Okay.
And then if we see, a positive response as we expect to, we would open it up to other departments, specifically social studies and the science department.
Okay.
We can certainly open it up to other departments, but I think those would be the 2 most natural that I would think of after the English department.
Okay. And are we paying for this on a per student head or on a per teacher head?
So it is per student.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact number, but I know that it's somewhere in the ballpark of 5,600 for the year. Am I-
Yeah, it was the budget. The quote we had for this year was just under $6,000 for the whole high school.
For the whole high school. So we're rolling it out in the English department, but we actually we have it if we need it for the whole high school.
That's right. As
Correct.
Ms. Keffi said, it's by student and it's not specific to any one discipline.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. The nice thing is that we get a specific pricing and we get a cut using, or through the IU rather. So we
Okay.
get a pretty significant discount.
Okay. So, but the real benefit, it sounds like, I mean, excuse me, there's certainly, it sounds like a benefit to teachers in terms of being able to comment online, et cetera, although you probably could do some of that through Google Docs. But it sounds like the real help here is to help our students with their research capacity and making sure that they understand how to use their research notes without just copying.
So we've spent a good portion of this year, moving over to Office 365 and using Schoology as well. So our
I
teachers
forgot we're not
have,
using
so we're
Google
trying to
Docs.
shy away from Google Docs, but the kids love Google Docs, but we're trying to, gently persuade them. Schoology allows editing in some capacities, but not to the extent that Feedback Studio does.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Andrew, have you got anything?
Sure. So Turnitin has been part of or integrated into Canvas, and I've used that. So I'm just kind of going from my own experience as an educator. And I'm glad that you were specific about which department and how it would be used, because I think that for writing pedagogy, where teachers are paying very close attention to how kids are writing and where there's a lot of markup, then I can see this tool being very useful, especially for teachers that are very comfortable with the online user experience. I'm a little bit old school in the sense that I like to mark on paper, or I might just have a different way of doing it. So I like the idea that it's possible for different teachers with different styles to find some benefit from this. I think it's helpful also to mention the price, just to get an idea that this isn't going to necessarily break the bank. However, as a researcher as well, I'm kind of curious as to how we will be following this. And I think that Sarah was kind of alluding to it too. So can we follow this, get feedback, make sure that this is something that people are finding benefit from? I've done a little bit of research on learning technologies, and there's a lot of neat stuff out there with bells and whistles, but I'm sure, as you know, sometimes those bells and whistles are not going to be as useful as they might seem, right? And so that's the approach. That's how I approach learning about this and the tool itself. And I hope that it really provides benefit for teachers, and I'm curious to see how that goes.
So one of the resources that we've had at the high school this year is Virginia Glatzer, and I can't say enough about what a wonderful resource she's been in terms of providing us with feedback from our teachers. So Virginia is at the high school 2 days a week, and she is open to meeting with any teachers that need help with technology, because our concern was we wanted to make sure that they had the support that they needed as we moved from, not just from, to Office 365, but from, a PC platform to a Mac platform for the teachers this year. And so our concern was, again, making sure they had that support. And she has really built some amazing relationships with the teachers. They trust her. They reach out to her all the time. And so I would think that she would play a big part of it to make sure that, if teachers were struggling with Turnitin or had questions about it, as we went through the year, that, we would touch base, she could work with them, and then we would touch base with the teachers as well as her to see, where issues would arise or, what they saw as benefits.
Could you? What's her name? Virginia.
Virginia Glatzer?
How do you
Am I
spell
pronouncing that right? I always feel like I pronounce her last name wrong.
Okay, and she's a Turnitin representative?
No,
Oh.
she's an instructional coach,
Oh, okay.
technology coach. I should say,
Instructional
really.
coach.
Yes, she works for us.
Okay, all right. Getting to know. I see. Okay, good. All right, that's good. Yeah, I mean, that's just something that I'm just curious, just, in general, but I think also just as part of our normal M&E kind of approach.
Right.
So, thanks.
Okay, Asa, let's hear what the students think.
Yeah, I've got to say, admittedly, at first I was a little bit hesitant in seeing the purpose of this. But I think the point about like the cost of cheating in university versus high school was something that really made the difference for me. With the transition to Office 365, I think you can pretty much do everything, if not the vast majority of what this program might offer in terms of grading. And I'm still not sure, like you mentioned, I'm not sure how many teachers prefer grading online versus just I think a lot of them prefer to actually just write stuff in because they can write in the margins, they can highlight, which I'm sure you can do with this as well. But it's a little bit more fluid and it's a little bit more you have a little bit more freedom. But like I said, the point about cheating was what really made the difference for me here. Just because, as I said earlier, the difference between cheating in university is potentially getting kicked out, which is, depending on how much you're paying for tuition, a $40,000 mistake. And here it might be the cost of a zero. So I think really emphasizing this and getting this into the students' minds early is really important. And for a cost of $5,600 per year, I think it's something that's just easily affordable.
I think I just want to piggyback on what Asa was just saying and to just reinforce what Mr. Hostetler said as well, that it's not a gotcha. It's meant to be a learning tool for the kids. We're not looking to say like 25% of your paper was from Google, .com or wherever it was from, to really teach them, again, how to use resources well, effectively, and, with integrity. So.
One thing that can happen because of this is that we have more control over making students come and see us because we have the evidence in front of us. Sometimes I hear my colleagues, they're sort of in doubt, they're not sure, it sounded really good. We want to trust our writers, but we know that we haven't always taken them to that level of sophistication, and yet we're not out to get them, but we can't prove it. And now we can, and then we can help them learn to paraphrase. And I can't think of a teacher in the department who wouldn't actually enjoy sitting down. The one-on-one is often the best part of this writing instruction. And with the evidence in front of us, but no penalty behind us, we can really help them. That's what we're planning on and hoping for.
That's great. It's sort of like an objective, like intermediary.
It is.
It
We've
can
never had that
help
before.
That's great. Yeah.
And I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but they have over 450,000 papers in their repertoire, and they also have over 1 million websites that they can reference. So there's a good amount.
They also log all the papers our students will submit through Turnitin.com, so it'll reference it against other Radnor submitted papers as well.
Sorry to put my lawyer hat on. Do we have any privacy concerns with them logging our students' papers?
We do not. We can make a decision about that, whether or not we want them to keep them. We do
Okay.
not have to have them keep them.
Okay.
That's entirely up to us.
Okay, Ms. McMiniman, any concerns, questions?
No, I'm all for it. I think the integrity of, I think the integrity of the writing that kids need to learn is really important.
They can't hear you, I don't know why.
Pull the microphone. Pull the
I think it's on.
There you go.
And I really think that's really important. I'm hoping that starting this at the high school can eventually trickle down to the middle school level because we work very hard with that. Kids think that you can just copy and paste and that's their paper. So I'm really excited to see how it works at the high school and eventually trickle down in some degree.
So my question is a little bit global, and so I'm wondering, we have an honor code at the high school. Is that taken seriously so that, do we have a problem with people plagiarizing, even though we're under a, I think we're under a, culture there that, you're on your own honor.
So, a couple years ago, in conjunction with the honor code that we have in place, we changed the way that we present assessments and major assignments, where the honor code statement is the top of the test or the top of the, whatever the assessment is, and the student has to sign off, right, that there's no cheating, etc. Again, in an effort to put that in front of the student and remind them of what they're asked to do, as an honorable student at Radnor High School. I think that plagiarism is not unique to Radnor. I think it's something that all high schools deal with in some capacity. Yeah.
So you're telling me it is a problem that we have, like the fact that, we're assuming the best of our students is not maybe necessarily what's happening on the ground?
Honestly, I don't think it's up. I think you're trying to. I don't want to categorize it as a problem necessarily, but I think whenever you have a high achieving school district like Radnor, like Lower Merion, like Conestoga, there's a lot of pressure on our students, and so sometimes they fall prey to things like that. And whether it's one instance in a year or 15 instances, we want to make sure that we address it properly.
I would just jump in. I don't think there's a high school across the country that doesn't deal with this issue, and it's on multiple levels. Some of it is innocent, some of it is not realizing, some of it's very purposeful, some of it comes down to last minute. There's a lot of things. I really like what Mr. Hostetler shared about, it's these teachable moments, it's the one-on-one opportunities, and if this is going to help foster and help with those opportunities for those one-on-one teaching moments within as a student is developing as a writer, I think that can be very positive.
And I think you should know that I don't think there's one teacher in the English department who picks up a set of papers and starts grading them looking for plagiarism. So in answer to your question, we don't approach the papers that way. And I think we're fortunate that we still trust our students. I would say that with a blanket reference. And then occasionally we grow suspicious. But this isn't something we're doing as a reaction to multiple honor code violations and multiple papers that are wrong. It's more in line with what he was referencing, that could we save one or two from a really bad mistake later on.
Right. Because just philosophically, I would rather it be intrinsic to the individual, that they realize that, that's not a way to get ahead in life, to cheat. Like, you're much better off doing the work and learning. So I don't want it to become where we're not assuming that you're going to have the intrinsic value to not do that. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't want it to flip to, oh, now we're checking everybody. Like, yes. I don't know.
Well, and I think, as Mr. Stetler said, it's the difference between, whether it's deliberate or the idea of paraphrasing. It's a very different world today where students are on their devices and they cut and paste and they highlight and they put things in, and, they may think they've paraphrased it enough. They may feel like it's in their own words. They may connect it with some transition statements, but when you put it through a plagiarizing checker, all of a sudden it's like, wow, 80% of this paper isn't mine. It came from somewhere on the internet. So that awareness, it's not the school report that I used to do where you'd find this much in the encyclopedia and you'd try to turn it into 5 paragraphs. Now it's like you've got 100 sources and you don't even have to type them. You just highlight them and put them in. And while my best intentions may be that I'm going to put it in my own words and I'm going to, trim things down, this is going to help students to understand, how much of that have you actually done? Or is this really just from, somebody's blog post or whatever?
So to kind of follow on that, can the students run the check themselves, or it's only at the teacher level that you can run a check to see?
My understanding is that the teacher has to run it.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, I do want you to know that Mr. Rosen has done a phenomenal job with the Honor Council, and every year he takes his council into homerooms to work with the students and to present what it truly means to follow the honor code and to make sure that that's understood. So we are setting that culture.
If I could just jump in, I mean, another way to think about this also is that this is about developing a scholarly skill, and not the gotcha kind of framing, right? And as a college professor, I can spot. I've honed my plagiarism radar pretty well. I could spot that stuff from 100 miles away. But at the same time, in a different context, when you're dealing with high school students, middle school students that are, like Maureen said, the way students are working with text now, text is everywhere. It's just around you, and it's so easy to grab from a million different sources. So I imagine that this tool will be very helpful for getting students and teachers kind of working together on this and seeing it as a skill development issue.
And this is just a factual. What system are we using for people to build their bibliography? Do we use a certain, is it the APA or do you know what we're using?
We use the MLA
Okay.
at Radnor.
All right, thank you.
And
Just
our
wanted to
students
know.
start as early as third grade. They use Noodle tools through the library to cite their references and things like that. So, they come right up through the system, being trained in those types of things from a very early age.
All right. Anybody else have any comments? All right. Thank you. Thanks
you.
for doing the work on this, and
Thank you.
we'll wait and hear how it's going. Let's hope it's what we hope it is.
All right, so we'll roll right into our piece on diversity. I'm going to open up the PowerPoint. You have a copy of it in your packet.
Yeah. Can we get the clicker? Can we get the clicker? Yeah. Can we?
Do we have an advance or
The clicker.
You can the mouse. I can do it from there. Okay, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
I'll pay attention. There we go.
Thank you, Dr.
That good?
McGuigan. So thank you for having us again to talk about diversity at the high school. This is something that, Mr. Bechtold knows is very near and dear to my heart, as it is to his. It's something very important to us and something we've been really working hard over the past few years to address at the high school. I think it's very clear that when we look at people from different backgrounds and different cultures and different religions and different races, they bring a richness to our lives. They help us learn. They help us to grow as individuals. I know that over the past 5 years, Mr. Bechtold has learned a lot about Greek culture working with me, and he is really enriched for it.
That's the truth.
But truly, we have so many, amazing students from all different backgrounds, and I think we all have something to learn from each other. And so, this was something that we really wanted to take a look at and to make sure that we were meeting the needs of all of our students, not just our typical Radnor students, but our students that struggle, both academically and in terms of socioeconomic status, to make sure that we were meeting their needs. And so, if you could fast forward, I don't want to, necessarily bore you with the definitions of diversity and equity, but looking, we certainly want to look to make sure that everybody has access to the same opportunities, no matter, what their background is. We want to make sure that we are involving them and empowering our students to make good decisions and to have different opportunities. So I think one of the things that we wanted to do today, if you can forward to the first slide, 2015, 2016, Dr. McGuigan,
Yep.
is just to give you a little bit of the history to, understand where we came from and where we are now. So back in 2015, 2016, when Dr. Stevenson was our Director of Secondary Education, he brought Dr. Courtney Portluck to work at the high school with our faculty to introduce the ideas of equity and inclusion. So that was really our first, dive into this. We looked at our AP scores that year and started to work with the AP Potential program to make sure that we were identifying students using PSSAs and other standardized scores to see who we felt could be challenged and weren't necessarily being challenged. And so that program came to be, and that was a great opportunity for us. And we started a mentoring program that year to start looking at our students that were struggling. That next year, in 2016, 2017, we started working with one of our alumni, Mubarak Lawrence, who is a graduate of Radnor, as I said, but also a graduate and alumni of the ABC program. Mubarak comes from New York, and so he spent 4 years here at Radnor, graduated with honors, got a full scholarship to Ursinus College, and when he left Ursinus, he started a nonprofit organization that works down in Philadelphia to help not just children that are in poverty and don't have educational opportunities, but adults, helping them to find work, helping them to learn how to interview, helping them to learn to get the skills in place so that they can, help their families and do well. So he has been instrumental the past few years in this whole process, and he started working with us that year to really, help our students understand the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, what it meant to be culturally competent. That same year, we were recognized as a No Place for Hate high school for the first time, which was a wonderful achievement. And we also started a Black student union that year. The first year, we had over 30 members, so it was really, up and running, to say the least. In addition, we expanded our Black History Month celebration to include different guest speakers from the community to speak about issues of race, diversity, and inclusion. Yes, thank you. So Mubarak's role continued to grow that following year, and he started working with our freshmen as part of our freshman fundamental program to really start as early as we could addressing these ideas. And one of the things that we did, last year was start to look at our college prep population. And we've talked about this before. We talked about it in November with the data team. We talked about it the year before, or data presentation, excuse me. Talked about it the year before when we made the decision to push biology off to sophomore year for our college prep students and give them that extra year of growth. Because what we were seeing with our freshmen last year is that they were really struggling academically and also in terms of being a learner. And so we wanted to make sure that we addressed all of their needs. And so we worked with our college prep teachers that year. We met on a monthly basis. We looked at different strategies. We spoke about different students and, discussed what could we do. What's working for John? What do we see in the classroom? What is he doing in history versus what is he doing in English? And what have you been successful, in doing to get him to, complete his work, et cetera. And really just having those conversations that we needed to have. In addition, we started sending a core group of teachers down to the University of Pennsylvania to take part in the Delaware Valley Consortium of Equity and Excellence. They went to lots of different workshops, all different topics, trauma training, trauma education, inclusion, differentiated instruction, so all different topics, and the idea being that they would gather the information and come back to the larger group and tell us what they had learned, and then they could flesh it out in their classroom. That same year, one of the PLCs that we did, professional learning communities that we did, was a peer observation group. So we had a lot of teachers at the college prep level and even beyond that, but a lot at the college prep level going into each other's classrooms to see, how they were working with the students and what they were doing in terms of instruction, which I think was really powerful, because whether you're a first-year teacher or a 30-year teacher, I think we all have something to learn from each other. So this year, we've continued to expand what we have in place. As a building, we have an equity team in place that has teachers from all different departments that meet, on a monthly basis to start having these conversations about race, start having these conversations about equity, to make sure that, again, we're constantly reassessing what we need to do for our students. In November, we welcomed Dr. Caprice Hollins, who is the founder of Cultures Connecting. She is a diversity and equity inclusion expert. She was very well received by our faculty. They adored her. They've asked her to come back next year because she just was fantastic. I can't say enough about her. In addition to that, we have some groups this year that we have put together that have really been successful, and Mr. Bechtel will talk about a little bit about that as well. We have Reverend Howard, who is well known in the community. He is working with our minority males in the Dream Leadership Academy, and he meets with them once a month. He has a very specific curriculum to address, healthy relationships, job interviewing, all these different skills that these students need to have. Mubarak is with us again, working with the Black Student Union. One of the things that we were able to do this year is to talk about different types of communication. We hope to get down to the elementary schools in the next month or so. We're working to put that together so that we can work with the little ones and start the conversations even earlier than we have, and maybe even the middle school if there's time. We had our first talent show this year, which was a huge success. We had over, I think it was 35 students take part, and it really was phenomenal to see all the different diverse, talents that they have. In addition, when we formed the Dream Leadership Academy, we had some of our female students come to us and say, well, hey, what about us? And so we heard them very clearly, and, we formed the Female Empowerment Group. And Marisha Marsh, who is a consultant that works with Mubarak, has been working with our girls, and they have done some really wonderful things this year. They were able to pull it together to have a celebration for Women's History Month, where they reached out to the social studies teachers and, had discussions in class surrounding different topics that affect women in society. They put all these lovely quotes around the school and, facts of the day about women in history, and we intend to, keep expanding that program next year. And I think that if you turn your page to year one, it'll kind of give you an outline of what we've been trying to accomplish as a whole this year. So our goal was to create an equity team, which we've done, to have some training at the high school, which we did in November with Dr. Hollins. Something that I think we are most proud of is our after-school tutoring program, which was a long time in the making. So, with the very generous help of the Radnor Educational Foundation, we were able to remove the barrier of transportation, which was what was really kind of holding us up, because we haven't had an after-school bus, and the issue is, if we bus for our students at Radnor, we have to bus for everybody in the district. So they were able to provide us the funding for that. So we have after-school tutoring program twice a week now, on Mondays and Wednesdays. Mondays is for math and science. Wednesdays are for social studies and for English, and we have our own teachers working with our students. It is open to all students at Radnor High School. However, I think when we created the program, our hope was to reach the students that, A, probably can't afford to have tutoring, and B, really need to get that extra help. And we have seen that. We have seen the right kids there, the kids that we were most concerned about. And it really has been extremely successful. So I am very, very pleased of the way things are going and hope for that to continue next year. One of our goals is to also look at what's in place, not just this year, but moving forward at the other 5 schools in the district. And moving into year 2, we certainly want to continue our cultural competence training. We want to make sure that we have internal trainers at the high school so that we're not constantly looking outward to bring people in. Alicia Alfonso and Tom Hasty, 2 teachers at the high school, have applied to the National SEED program, which is run out of Harvard University, and is a program that trains teachers and other educators in cultural competency so that they can go back. It's a train-the-trainer model, so that they can go back to the high school or wherever they work and work with other educators. The nice thing about the program is that part of the requirement is that they have to hold a monthly seminar, and that has to be open to other schools. So we can be the example for other high schools in the area and really bring them and get them involved in this endeavor. So that would be nice as well. If you look on that last page or the last slide, one of the things that I have spent some time doing this spring is really, going around to the different schools and meeting with the different principals to kind of get a gauge for where we are across the board. And so I've seen a lot of really wonderful things. Some of our elementary schools use responsive classroom. Some use positive behavior support programs for our students. We have mentoring programs in place across the district. One of our goals for next year is to really take a look at the curriculum, and I think in some places that's already being done, to see, are we representing different voices? Are we making sure that we're doing that successfully? And just really examining the different needs of each school to make sure that we are not just looking at our student needs, but we're looking outwards towards our community to make sure that we're hearing what they need as well. Do you want to add anything?
I think Mrs. Kevgis covered a lot of it. One of the keys here at Radnor High School is just create a safe and welcoming environment for our students, and make sure that we are recognizing and celebrating differences and helping our students to grow. And I think that you've seen some very deliberate steps that we've taken over the last 4 years. We constantly evaluate where we're at and what our needs are. And one of the best things that we have is we get feedback from both our teachers and from our students. And so we're really proud of where we've come, and I think there are great things ahead of us.
All right, thank you. You want to start? Or you want to start over there? We're going to start with Asa.
Yeah, sure. I think this is absolutely a really good idea. I mean, in my own classes, I do see a lack of diversity, and especially in these English classes, as was touched upon, I think it's really important to have different viewpoints just because of the different interpretations that they provide. Like I mentioned, especially in these English classes where the meanings of certain books or stories are open to interpretation, the diversity of viewpoints really does provide different opinions that might not otherwise be there if you had a more just static, homogeneous classroom. So really, I don't see any problem. I think it's all benefits.
And have you seen these initiatives happening in the school?
The Black Student Union is definitely a prominent one, and I know the talent show they put on was heavily emphasized. I think a lot of the work that the teachers do goes unnoticed just because of they don't tote their own achievements, which is, I think, something that's really nice. But I have no doubt that they're working towards promoting this inclusivity. But other than the Black Student Union, I wasn't aware of the Girls Empowerment Group or the Dream, the Bumper Howard, the Dream Leadership Academy. But I like I said, those programs make total sense.
Okay. Teacher comments? Okay. You don't want to talk?
No, deferring, sir.
Ms. Junn?
Sorry. So I just had a couple questions, and it's not criticism at all. It's more follow-up. Like, I had questions as you were going along, and I didn't want to interrupt you. So the mentoring program from 2015-16, is that still in place? And who serves as the mentors, and how do we identify the students? So there you go.
The mentoring program does continue. Mrs. Kolb, our social worker, actually is running it at the moment. We use our guidance counselors. We use Mrs. Kolb, who has a pulse on the community. We obviously look to our teachers to refer students. So we look to all different sources to see who needs to have that mentorship. We are looking in the future to expand the program for our freshmen. So that's something that will be coming down the pike.
That's great. It sounds like there's been a lot of focus, and I think we've heard about this in the past, on the college prep track. And you mentioned that the college prep teachers have been visiting each other's classrooms. Is there a reason you've had just that, or has there also been crossover with like the honors teachers or the seminar level teachers? I mean, I understand that there may be different needs in different levels, but it would seem to me that you could still learn teaching styles from other classroom levels.
So it does happen at other levels, and it's something that I feel really strongly about, that no matter what level you're at, that you learn great practice from observing other teachers, whether you're a college prep teacher or an honors teacher or whatever the case. And so it's something that I've really tried to reinforce over the past couple of years, and that will continue.
Great, and I may have misunderstood that when you were saying it, so I didn't. That's why I asked about it. I was concerned that Dream Leadership Academy was all male until I remembered there was the females on the next page, and I'm glad that those students spoke up for themselves.
I know.
They're awesome.
The one question there was, you talk about a 4-year plan, and so maybe this only talks about 2 years. Is that because the 4-year plan is still in process?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay. The equity leadership team, is that the group of teachers that went to the special training, or is that administrators like the two of you?
So it's actually there are some teachers that actually were in the initial group from last year, but it was something that when we worked really closely with Dr. Hollins, and so part of the reason why we haven't put that 4-year plan out is because one of the things that she really reinforced to us is how important this work is and how deliberate the steps have to be, and it's something that, you know, you really need to take your time with. And so we've been, you know, purposely very thoughtful about the steps that we're taking. And so when we formed the equity team, you know, in the fall, it was, you know, we said to her, well, do you think it's better to handpick the teachers that are going to be on there, you know, or is it something that we open up to everyone? And it seemed common sense to open it up to everyone, but I'm not the expert, so I always, you know, defer to her. And she reinforced that idea that it was really important to open it up to everybody to make sure that, you know, you have a representative group of not just people who, you know, understand what it means to be culturally competent, but those that don't and really, you know, may have biases that they don't even recognize to help them get to that place.
That's great. That's great. And I mean, it's a spirit of inclusion at the top, too. But I'm glad to hear that you're taking your time. I would encourage you. I doubt that it will be solved in 4 years. So I hope that the equity leadership team is not just a multiple year program. I hope it's something that we continue to.
So I think that the idea of a 4-year plan is to get programs in place, not so much to get the spirit out in 4 years. I think that this is something that has to be in place forever, so to speak. You know, you're changing a culture.
That's great. The after-school tutoring program, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but do we have any data yet on participation rates? Are kids coming once and then not coming back? Do they come every week, or do they kind of drop in before tests?
So it is a drop-in service, right? They don't have to register. I have kept attendance for every single week, and so that's one of the things that we'll be looking at the end of the year. I certainly see a lot of students that are, you know, regular customers, so to speak. You know, I do see that in general, it tends to be a little bit. There tend to be more students on math and science days than English and social studies days, but that could change. You know, that may just be the time of the year or what assessments are coming up or papers, but, you know, we've had a really good turnout.
That's great.
And anecdotally, Mrs. Kevgis, I know, had a student stop down and speak with her today because teachers are working to get grades done, and a student was bragging about how they had gotten a C the last quarter and that they got a B+ this quarter in their math class, and it's because they regularly went to the after-school tutoring program is what the student attributed to. So I know that Mrs. Kevgis shared that with me, and that's something that I can see as a success story. We know that we've got students that are using this and this really working for them.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear that they, especially if it's not like a teacher says you should go to tutoring. It's you know, you take the initiative and you say, you know what, I think a student takes the initiative and says, I think I could use this help. So I think it's wonderful. I'm sure REF would be happy to hear that, you know, their money is going to good ends to help with the transportation for that. But certainly, you know, there's always a part of the community that wants to see the data. So to the extent, I mean, I think it's great that you're keeping attendance. That was kind of where I was going with how many kids are coming. So that's wonderful to hear.
And just to, it's one of those things too that it's open to everyone. So I mean, the goal, you know, with this and some of the discussions was that, you know, we have students at all levels, at all places that, you know, struggle from time to time. So we wanted to make sure that this program was something that was open to everyone and that all students felt comfortable using it. So I think that's something that we can continue to grow upon and build upon.
And it's budget season, so I just want to make sure I make a plug. This is actually not regular district money. This is actually special Title I funding that we get from the federal government.
It's a combination. It's been a combination of dollars between the Title I funding and then the REF grant to pay for the transportation. There's been a combination of dollars. And it's something that we would love to see not only grow. I mean, a good problem to have will be that we've got more and more kids attending, and a good problem to have is that, you know, this is something maybe we want to look to have at our middle school as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So last thing, I think it's great that you guys care so much about this. This is definitely something that's very near and dear to my heart as well. I actually, anecdotally, have had pretty good experiences with my kids. The curriculum at Radnor Elementary has seemed very, the teachers have been very focused on making sure that they're inclusive, and it's not just kind of the standard historical set of reading materials. But I'm glad to hear that you're not just saying, oh, well, we'll wait till they get to high school to focus on this. I really appreciate that you're taking the initiative to spread this down to the curriculum throughout the district. I think that's really, really important.
Well, this is fantastic, and like Sarah said, this is something that is also very, very close to my my background and my interests. And I'm trained as a sociocultural anthropologist, so these issues of culture and diversity are definitely in my wheelhouse. And so, you know, just big picture remarks that I think for kids to learn ideas about diversity, acceptance, inclusion, very important. And also, I think to make that awareness and that programming part of what we do, like what you said, it's just part of what we do at Radnor, to make it part of our culture, very important, I think. So those are just some big picture remarks. Maybe just to follow up on some of what Sarah was talking about, I was just noticing on the second page of the high school equity plan, there's a bullet point under considerations for future growth. I think it is like 7 down. And it says, identify the benchmarks, milestones, performance measures by which Radnor High School can assess progress against their goal of promoting and achieving equity. I think that is very important. You know, I think that it's, on the one hand, making these cultural changes, as was pointed out by Courtney and others, takes a long time. It's careful work. It's work that needs to be attended to very deliberately. But on the other hand, we want to see some kind of progress, being able to measure that. It's hard to measure certain things. Not everything that can be counted counts, and not that saying. So not everything that counts can be counted, so to speak. And so I think that with that being said, could we attend to this bullet point closely, and could we have that documented over time, so that we can create a nice narrative of, here's some progress that we're making, here's some areas for improvement, so that we can build a story on that.
So I just have some, I guess they're kind of nitpicky, no, questions. So the staffing of the after-school tutoring, who does that? Is it whoever volunteers to do that? Is there a supplement for that from Title I? Like, how does that piece work?
The salary for our teachers is covered by Title I.
So it would be a supplement to your regular pay if you
Correct.
chose to do this?
Yes.
And so do you recruit people to do it, or are people volunteering?
People have
to staff
volunteered,
it?
you know, and we've looked at the needs of the students and looked at who would be the best fit for the program.
And they've agreed to help out, kind of thing. So, so has there been a problem getting staffing that matches what you need? Okay.
No.
So that's cool. And Mr. Bechtold, you mentioned you want to collect feedback from teachers and students, and I just wonder, how are we collecting feedback? This is sort of to Andrews. How are we getting, like, what are we looking for?
So, I think one of the things that Mrs. Kevgis pointed out was the Girls Empowerment Group. So we had a group of girls that came down. We knew that we had a population of boys that really could use some mentoring because of the disciplinary referrals, the academic issues that we had. And so we knew that we had a targeted population that we had to get a mentoring program for. So we actively sought one out. Girls saw this. They saw that the boys were having a positive experience with this, and they came down and we were responsive to it. So again, I think that as you go through, we've got students that are very open and very affable, and they provide us feedback on a regular basis. I think our goal as administrators is to make sure that we're listening and that we're responsive to our students and our teachers' needs.
So it's not really a formal, I mean, you're talking about good communication channels in the school, but your feedback isn't going to be a formal mechanism, really?
I was going to say, no, it's not like we've got we have a formal mechanism that we're sending out on the first of the month. A lot of these things have been identifying a need that's come to us and then making sure that we're being thoughtful about how we can meet those students' needs, whether it's looking at data. And again, I'll go back to the Dream Leadership Academy. We looked at data, we spoke about it as an administrative team, we saw that there was a need, we put a plan in place. So that was one of the ways that we got feedback, was based on our data. And then we got anecdotal feedback from students, and then we brought the Girls Empowerment Group along.
And even at the equity team meetings, teachers will give feedback, strategies they've learned at the workshops. They'll try them in their classroom. They'll come back. They'll share it with each other. They'll talk about their needs. So, the important piece, for everything we do with equity and inclusion and whatnot is that this becomes a part of kind of the way we do business. So it should be part of, conversations about the math curriculum. It should be part of when we're selecting textbooks and novels. And so we really want it to be intertwined with everything we do instead of sort of this, let's stop and talk about diversity and inclusion now. And I think that they've achieved that in that a student feels comfortable coming down to the office and saying, hey, you made a group for the boys, what about the girls, kind of thing. So I think that tells us that it's, it's starting to thread itself into the culture, which is great.
I think I'll tell you, two stories. I think there's also a mindset that needs to be a growth mindset, let's say, put it that way. So, even in Radnor, we have students who are homeless. As horrible as that is, and so we had a teacher come to us at the beginning of the year, or not the beginning of the year, towards the end of the first semester, struggling with the student in terms of attendance, struggling with the student in terms of academics, and we sat down and had a conversation, and, there's certain things that you can share and there's certain things that you can't share. The student had shared some pretty personal information with the teacher, and told them that, they had been on 3 different couches over the course of 1 week because they didn't have a place, to sleep. And so, the teacher kind of broke down and said, my God, here we're worrying about whether they're in class or not, and whether they're paying attention or not, and this kid doesn't even know where he's sleeping tonight or she's sleeping tonight. And just having that in the forefront that, we're not all in the same place. We had a PE teacher who was wonderful and met with a student who was, again, struggling, and said, listen, I'm willing to work with you and to take a look at your quarter grade because you're failing right now, but I need to see some things from you. And one of the things I need to see you do is to come in, a T-shirt and shorts every day. And the student, shook their head and said yes. And, we both looked at each other, the teacher and myself, and realized that maybe this kid doesn't have the clothes to come every day. And so, we had that conversation, and they felt safe, safe enough to have that, discussion, which to us is everything, to have that trust to be able to share those things with us. And so, we met the needs, and we found clothes for that student. I mean, it's being cognizant of all those different issues that these kids have to deal with on a daily basis. Maybe they don't have a washer to wash their clothes and they only have one set of clothes for PE or whatever the case is. Just looking at it from a different perspective, from their perspective. We're so blessed in this school district in so many ways. that we just have to remember that not everybody's as fortunate as we are. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is phenomenal to hear this. I've been on this board a long time, and this is something I think to just hear this cultural shift laid out this way just really warms my heart too. I mean, I'm so pleased you're doing this. I have to say, I was kind of expecting, we were going to be tracking the hug groups again, and we're going to have hard data to show that we were doing this. And so this is a little bit not that, but I'm fine with that at this point. So this is exactly what we need to be doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any last questions?
Anybody want to?
All right. So next month, we'll look forward to talking about wellness, and we'll also hear about the pay survey. And that'll be it for today. We're going to finish early.
We are.
Thank you again.
She patiently said she was going to wait and ask at the end.
We didn't do our last public comment.
There you go.
We will entertain our last public comment.
Good afternoon. Roberta Winters, 326 Williams Road in Rosemont. And I was, as you were, deeply moved by what we just heard about the initiatives at the high school. And I also was a part of the Radnor Education Foundation. We're visiting that after-school program, and I heard some of the same remarkable things from students about how their grades have improved as a result of this. And I also spoke to one young woman who actually, because of circumstances, takes the P&W back and forth to Radnor High School, and so she's not home until like 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night by the time she has to make all the transfers to get home. So it's really amazing that she's staying that late to do all that to move forward in her life. So it's really inspirational. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is that I think what Mr. Bechtel said about being safe and welcoming is important, but it's not just important at the high school, it's important at all levels. And I think, from my perception, and I could be wrong, that as we've focused probably to a very high degree on academic achievement and have grouped kids according to skill levels, that we've seen less opportunities for diversity in classrooms than we may have seen in the past. And so I think as we look at wellness and holistic kinds of views of what we need in our world of the future, we need to think is, as you said, not everything that counts can be counted, but I think we really need to be looking at perhaps some of the grouping practices and also some of the areas in which we can actually promote diversity in ways that are not just perhaps in a feel-good way, but actually in a meaningful way at all levels. And I think the high school has made significant inroads in that, but I don't think it should be, and I'm glad the initiative is moving down into the schools because I think it's sorely needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Winters. Okay. Am I done? So that brings our meeting to a conclusion. We will meet again. Our May meeting will be May 14th at 5 p.m.